Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Optimizing Mother podcast. It is an honor and a pleasure to be here tonight with a friend, I want to say, and cousin, Mrs. Chanie Wolf, that is a teacher and assistant principal in Beis Rivka Seminary. Besides for being a mother herself, the subject that she's teaching in seminary is Chinuch. And so on this podcast, the Optimizing Mother podcast, when we're all working on growing and improving our chinuch, I just thought it would be so appropriate to have Mrs. Chanie Wolf. So hi, Chanie, welcome.
Thank you so much. So honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I know that you teach so much and there's so much to cover, but my real question that I want to start with, is like a little bit more big picture. And I want to ask is that, 30, 40 years ago, there weren't as many quote unquote parenting resources as there are today. And today there are parenting books and there are parenting classes and there are, parenting platforms and people to follow and, accounts and there's so much parenting. And I'm just curious, is this parenting that people are following, is this the same thing as what you're talking about when you teach chinuch? Is this two separate things or is this the same?
That is an awesome question. So what I'm really passionate about in the chinuch class and really try to give over is that, like you said, there's so much to learn when it comes to parenting, when it comes to raising our children. There's so many elements. There's just always more to think about. There's always more to learn. As the Rebbe Rashab teaches us, that it is the obligation of a parent to spend half an hour a day thinking about the chinuch of their children. It means there obviously is so much more to this than just, I want them to grow to be a chassid Yirei Shamayim V'Lamden, and I'm going to keep thinking about that, right? There are obviously many, many components. But to the point that you're asking, which is so important, is chinuch as we think of it from Torah and Chassidus, different from, the sort of general, what the world calls parenting. So I think that's really similar to a larger perspective on life with Torah, meaning, there's a wonderful series from Sichas in English called Healthy in Body, Mind, and Spirit. And I think that really brings across this message where the Rebbe's approach, which is Torah's approach to life, is that a Yid needs to be healthy and wholesome. And in order to achieve that, there is body, there's guf, there is mind, emotion and mental health, and there is neshama, and you can't separate them. There's no way to separate a Yid's, just like, you can't separate mental health from physical health and physical health from mental health. You also can't separate that from neshama when it comes to a Yid. And this applies to everything. And how much more so, certainly in the chinuch of our children, that when we're raising Yiddish children, there's no aspect of what we're looking to accomplish in raising them physically, emotionally, anything, socially, that can be disconnected from Torah. So I feel like often there's this misunderstanding of okay, let's talk about their social skills. Let's talk about their emotional awareness and literacy. Let's talk about their anger management. Let's talk about bedtime routine. And then let's talk about their Yiddishkeit or Chassidishkeit. And I'm not sure what that is. What else is Yiddishkeit if not Torah's Emes, Torah's Chaim, a way of life? And in fact, there's something that I love that the Rebbe teaches about the role of a Yiddish woman, that we know there are 3 mitzvahs of a woman, and they are Shabbos, Kashrus, Taras, and Mishpacha. And the Rebbe points out in one place that's really fascinating that through these mitzvahs, what a woman accomplishes is that she elevates all aspects of life in her home. Specifically in the element of needs, meaning every human being has certain primary needs. And the Rebbe describes them as 3. There's a basic need for nourishment, right? We need food, drink. We need physical sustenance in order to live. There's the need for security. We all need physically, shelter and clothing and things that keep us safe. And then a larger level, sort of a structure that gives us safety and security. And there's the need for connection, relationships, love, people in our lives. And these are really primary needs that are universal. Everyone needs them. And yet for a Yid, what a Yiddish woman does is she's doing the same things technically everyone else is doing. She's doing morning routine and bedtime routine. She's serving her kids supper. She's giving them baths. She is dealing with their social issues that are happening at school and, learning challenges and homework and all the things. And yet what she does is she takes all these needs for nourishment, security, and love, and she elevates them. She says, and she understands that a Yiddish child needs to eat. But they don't just need food, and they don't just need healthy food physically. Of course they do. Why do they need healthy food? Because a Yid has to be strong and healthy in order to serve Hashem. And so she makes sure the food is not only healthy, which it needs to be, because as the Mezritcher Maggid said, a klein lechel guf, a small hole in the body is a large hole in the neshama, right? A strong guf is able to serve Hashem properly. So there is that mindset, which changes everything. Kol masecha yu l'shem shamayim, the intention. And then also certainly she ensures that the food is kosher on the highest level, because that's how a Yid is really going to be nourished, and gives tzedakah before the cooking, etc. And make sure the children are saying a bracha as they're eating that food. So it's a totality of everything that comes together, understanding that she's elevating this need. Same thing with security. The home is elevated through Shabbos, through bringing in a Yiddish atmosphere in the home largely. And the same thing with Taras Mishpacha, taking the relationships in the home and elevating them as well. So I think the point is that there's so much to raising children. There's so many aspects. It's like there's never a time that we know it all and have figured it out.
Okay, so I think what you're saying, just make sure that I'm understanding it right. I think what you're saying is that Chassidischkeit and Yiddishkeit are not a separate part of parenting, but that as women, our role is to infuse all the parenting. You might get tips from somebody how to eat or nutrition, like how to infuse the Yiddishkeit and Chassidischkeit into the parenting, so to speak. It's not separate. It's not like there's this track, there's this track. Right. So I think then what I would love for you to do is, could we take a step back? Can you define then what is chinuch? Like, what's the overarching Torah concept of chinuch? Because to be honest, right, sending my kid to an occupational therapist or some other parenting tip, it doesn't feel like chinuch, so to speak. So I understand what you were saying about like putting that into the parenting, but maybe we need to just translate what is chinuch.
Right.
What's chinuch? Right.
Okay. So there's so much from the Rebbe on chinuch. And, when I started teaching this class, I really had to pull from so many different places. And I was like, where is the, full compilation of the Rebbe's teachings on chinuch? There were Shari Chinuch, Al Neshei B'nai Yisrael. There were a lot of good places. Now there is a beautiful book called Teachings of the Rebbe on Chinuch. And I want to highly recommend that everyone go through that and really study that. There's just so much from the Rebbe on Chinuch, but there's one source in particular that I found very special, and I think really encapsulates everything that Torah and the Rebbe specifically are teaching us about chinuch. And the Rebbe says, what is the purpose of chinuch, and what is it? How do you define chinuch? And the Rebbe says like this: chinuch is revealing the neshama of a child. It's the process and the endeavor to bring out the neshama that is the child, to help them see themselves as such, to help them define themselves as a neshama, to the point, here I'm paraphrasing the Rebbe, really to reveal the neshama of the child, to the point that this essence, this identity of I am a chelek elekam mimal mamish, I'm a part of the Eibishter, and I'm here in the world to fulfill Hashem's mission for me. So to the point that expresses itself in their entire being, in their machshava, dibur, and ma'aseh, in their actions, in their speech, and even in their thoughts. Meaning this is the Rebbe's definition: reveal the neshama of the child and help it express itself. I think this is such a powerful definition, because what that tells us is the goal is not to get them just to do things. The goal is to help them very strongly and deeply identify as a neshama, see themselves as who am I? To answer the question, who am I? Strongly and confidently as I am a part of the Eibishter, I'm here in this world to serve him. That's the way they should see themselves. And if someone does, then obviously and naturally, they will strive to live that out in their machshava, dibur, and ma'aseh. They will act, of course, try to act like a yid in halacha and ma'aseh v'payil. They will speak like a yid. That's what they'll talk about. That's what they'll be into. That's the kind of language they're going to use. Refined language, Torah language. and they will think like a Yid. They'll have Yiddish perspectives on life's issues. They'll approach things from a place of what does Hashem say? What does Torah say? What does the Rebbe say? Like that is going to happen, not because we've made them do it and just because we've trained them to do it, but because we've helped them really see themselves as a neshama. That's the Rebbe's definition, as I understand it, of chinuch.
So connect it back to the practical, let's say, just to follow this train of thought. So like brushing teeth, connect that back to your definition of chinuch.
So, it's interesting. That really goes to the question of, in general, what does kol maaseh chayu l'shem shamayim mean, right? Chassidus teaches us that everything in our lives that is klipas noiga, that is neutral, can be elevated to help us serve Hashem, or it can be the opposite, right? There's a whole range of neutral. There are things that are clearly mitzvahs. They're clearly holy. Yeah, clearly you need to, daven, bench lift, whatever. Then there are things that are usser. And most of life is klipas noiga. Most of life is the brushing teeth and the eating supper and getting clothing or whatever. So the question is, where does Avodas Hashem come in there? Is it's all about the general intention. That doesn't mean we're stopping and meditating every 5 minutes, l'shem yichud kushav brichu. It's more a general awareness that we have. And I think when we pay attention to the Rebbe Rashab's instruction of think about the chinuch of our children half an hour a day, if at least once a day we're taking that kind of time to think about where we're going with our children, what is the goal, then certainly that is going to infuse all the practical things we're doing with a clear mindset of, does this fit with the goal or does it not? And if it does, and many things do, like a Yid needs to be strong and healthy to serve Hashem, then of course, and we will naturally express it like that. Like a chassid is a mesudar, a Yid has to be healthy. This is what we do. And no matter how much we say or don't say it, it's going to come across in, it's not about saying it every 5 minutes, right? It's a general understanding that, is this important for a Yid to be able to serve Hashem? If yes, then obviously that's what we need to do. The Rebbe says that a mother closing the window so that the draft doesn't blow in a child, that's avodas Hashem. When we just pay attention to, I am raising Yiddish and neshamas, they need to be healthy and functional on all levels in order to do their mission in this world. Then there's a lot of regular day-to-day practical things, and they're all l'shem shamayim. It all starts with the intention.
So then what I wonder is, if parenting can't be separate from chinuch, could chinuch be separate from parenting? Which means that chinuch book that you mentioned, does that inform your parenting? In other words, is that what you mean, that they're inseparable?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that the Rebbe's concept of, healthy in body, mind, and spirit, that the neshama needs to be part of it, means that there is in every single element of our children's development. And of course, the practical things like the brushing teeth, are a question maybe more of mindset. And here and there we mention, what Torah says about it and whatever. But the larger things, maybe the more subtle, the nefesh issues, the things related to emotions and social skills and behavior, in all those areas, it's really imperative that we bring the neshama in, that we talk from a language. First of all, why is this important, right? Why is this even a value? Why should you eat with manners? Why should you share or be mevater, right? Why should you give in and allow the other child to have, or whatever it is?
It's interesting. You mentioned mevater. I'm curious. Do you think language is important? Like, do you think that the word we use for the midah matters? Totally. Because, there was something interesting I just saw from the Rebbe about language, where there was something simple in Eretz Yisrael. They were saying something about morale in the army, and the Rebbe said, why using a secular term? You think like, what's wrong with morale? And the Rebbe said, use a Yiddish language, use something that implies emunah b'tachon, or at the very minimum, like a language from Lashon HaKodesh, which has that implication. And first of all, when it comes to mevater, which I love I Can Be a Mevater book. It's such a great chinuch book. Mevater is not the same thing as share. It's different. And it's also very different from the generic be nice. It's a very specific midah. And it's a midah that when you use that word reminds you of Rachel Imenu.
who's mavater. And when we teach our children, this is Torah. It's not just a nice value. This is not just people will like you and you'll end up having friends. It's not coming from a self-centered, this is just what the world says, or this is what's going to work for you. This is Torah. This is a mitzvah. This is what Torah teaches us, Rachel Imenu did. And the reason that we learn it is because we learned that this is how a Yid behaves. And when someone hurt us, Yosef HaTzadik, we forgive, 100% the language matters and the references matter. It's, just referring to the midah in connection with who we learn it from. Look who you're acting like so-and-so in the Torah really helps. First of all, clarify, why is this a goal? Where does this goal come from? Where does this value come from? It's a Torah value, and helps talk to their neshama, meaning why should I do it? Right, because I'm a Yid and I am a neshama, I'm a part of Hashem, and that's what's right for me, and it changes the whole conversation.
Right. So Chanie, I'm just curious though, with such an emphasis on chinuch, is there such a thing as it being too strong of an emphasis on like chinuch, almost like you're breathing down a kid's back, it almost sounds like do this, do that. Like, could you just parent without it being about chinuch? And also, like, does Yiddishkeit really have to be everywhere? And obviously Yiddishkeit has to be everywhere. You said and explained that so eloquently, but do we have to say it so strongly and so much? Like people might be it might feel like a little much.
That's interesting. I guess, is parenting too much? Like, can we just live with our kids instead of worrying about parenting? Like, why can't we just get through the day and enjoy life without being concerned about how am I parenting? Right? I think it's the same question. And ultimately, one of the challenges I feel when it comes to whatever we're going to call it, I'm going to call it chinuch, right? However we think of it, raising our children, is that there's so much and there's so much at stake. There's so much we need to think about. There's so much we need to do. And it's such a big goal and there's so many feelings about it. And the challenge is not that we have high goals for our children. The challenge is not having a vision. The challenge is the intensity of our feelings. I think one of the biggest, it may be the biggest challenge, I will talk for myself, that we face in being mechanech our children or students, but specifically children, is our egos. I think it's not a matter of the level. For example, the Rebbe talks about kimches. Why did she knew that in taking on this higher level of tznius, she was really trying to raise children that would reach a higher level than most. And why does she feel the need to do that? Can't they just be normal? Isn't that good enough? And the Rebbe says that if a woman has more she can give and has more that she can do for her children, that they should grow up on a higher level, then that's her role. And anything less than what she could be giving them is actually not meeting her tafkid. It's not accomplishing the reason Hashem gave her these specific children. So the problem is not when we aim higher. The problem is when we let our egos get involved. And that's when that's when it feels to a child like we're breathing down their back. When it's like, you must be tznius because I need you to be tznius, and don't you dare embarrass me walking out of the house like that. And you mean you're not going to listen to me? How dare you talk to me like that, right? The moment our ego gets involved, everything feels intense, no matter what our level is that we're expecting of them. But when we're able to work on it, and this is the avodah of a lifetime, to keep our ego in check, to keep our feelings and our own needs, and you owe me, and I want nachas, and I need this, and I'm afraid of that. When we're thinking, what does Hashem want from this child? That shouldn't come across intense. That should be thoughtful. I spend half an hour a day thinking about the chinuch of my child and making a strategy. That doesn't mean I walk around saying Hashem, mitzvah, mitzvah, Hashem every 3 seconds, right? It means I have clarity in my destination. I have clarity in the goal, and I'm being thoughtful about what opportunities I'm presenting my child with. I'm being thoughtful about how I'm guiding them. I'm being thoughtful about what I'm reinforcing at home. It shouldn't feel intense to the child. There is just clarity, and that clarity should be coming across.
How does it not become a personal agenda? How do you take your ego out? Feel it so passionately.
Yeah. I think we realize as we go through life that, all of Avodah is the same thing. It's all about getting out of our yesh. It's all about lifting ourselves out of our self-centeredness, which is really the challenge that we encountered from Eitz Hadas, right? The problem of Eitz Hadas, the Alter Rebbe teaches, is that we started seeing the world through a self-centered place. I want, I need, it's good for me. And the challenge is to move to a geula state where we're not thinking about ourselves. We're thinking about Hashem. And this is not unique to parenting, although there's no question that marriage and raising children are avodas, they're gifts, they're brachas, and they are also avodas that, very tremendous avodas that Hashem gives us for the purpose of helping us along this one key avodah that we have in life, which is getting out of ourselves. So sometimes, we might get away with it in other contexts. And the closer the relationship, the more intense it gets, the more at stake, right? And the more involved we are, the more intense everything is. And we start realizing, like, I don't have a choice. That goes back to the same core constant avodah of chassidus that we're working on, the avodah of bittul. And without tuning into chassidus, without tuning into the MS, we're going to struggle. We're always going to struggle. And parenting, I think, just like the Baal Shem Tov says, a mensch is a spiegel, a person is a mirror. When it comes to children, I feel that children are our biggest mirrors, and they force us constantly to look into ourselves and say, wait, where am I holding? And we'll get to, modeling, like, what am I modeling? We have to constantly look at ourselves and what am I feeling? What am I projecting? And having to deal with these children and raise them the way Hashem wants really presents us with a tremendous opportunity to do the avodah that we really need to do. And it's ongoing, and that's where we need a mashpia. That's where we need constant learning. Like it's something it's the avodah of a lifetime. But I think we don't have a choice. We just have to try our best and keep going at it.
Wow. I love it. I'm thinking about this, overarching concept that we said about Chinuch and about revealing the neshama and even in the gashmias and getting our ego out of the way. So I kind of feel like we spoke about the what is Chinuch. I'd love if you can give us some insight on, so how do we Chinuch? I think you hinted it. You said the word model. So I suspect you have more to share on that. Like, how do we go about this thing called revealing the neshama in our child?
Okay. Wow. Loaded question. The reason I spend increasingly every year when I teach this in seminary, it takes me longer and I get to less and less because the more I realize there's just so much to examine. And of course, the older I get, the older my children get, it's like, there's always more. And it's a massive topic, which reminds me, it's very funny. I remember there was once a Chinuch conference where there was a full session devoted to, I don't know, maybe it was dealing with bullying. And there was a full session dealing with like learning differences and a full session dealing on like social issues maybe. And, a bunch of different things like that. And then there was one session that was devoted to Chassidus Chinuch. Like in that session, we'll cover what there is to know about Chassidus Chinuch. And it struck me like, do we realize how large the topic of Yiddish Chassidus Chinuch is? How many values, we talked about Mevater. That's like one of the values within Midas Tovas. Like that's one of the Midas Tovas we want to teach our children. We also want to teach them Gemilas Chasadim. Torah also wants to teach them
MS.
Forgiveness and MS and right and humility and managing, like controlling their kas, and like and on and on and on. And each one of these is a huge topic and its own area of conversation and thought of like, what is this value? And how do I bring it over to my child? And each one, we answer differently. Like, how do you give this over? So it's so huge. And I think to even attempt to answer it in a few minutes is practically impossible, but maybe let's talk about like a few general things that come across everywhere. Maybe the first and most important one, no matter what the value is that we're teaching, a particular midah or Yerushalayim, love for a particular mitzvah, being strong in the face of peer pressure, whatever, right? Whatever it is. The first one, no question, going back to I mentioned a spiegel, is our own role modeling. Like there is nothing as powerful in chinuch as the example that we're showing our children. And this is where, like we said, the avodah of a lifetime really comes into a whole new level when we're raising children because we can't fake it. Children are very sensitive to MS. Young children, the worst thing they could say about a teacher is she's such a hypocrite. It's that sort of maybe like around third grade type of language, right? Such a hypocrite. Children have this very, very strong deep sensitivity to truth and consistency. and they're picking up, do you really mean this? Do you really sincerely mean this? Do you believe this? Do you live this? And they know. And that's not to say it suffices and we shouldn't teach it to them. But the first thing really is, like, when we're looking to impart a particular value to our children, or we're seeing their struggle with something, in that half an hour a day of thinking about chinuch, is like, wait, hold on, really, where am I holding? How much do I care about this? How important is it to me? Do I sacrifice for this ideal, or is it only when it's convenient? And like, am I expecting my child to do it when it's hard? And for me, it's okay. But do I really push myself in this regard? Do I take it seriously? And not only do I take it seriously, but do I love it? Because the example children are learning from us is not just, do you do it? That's important. That's step one. Not just, do you really care about it? But do you love it? Do you find joy in this? Is this a privilege to you, or is it a burden? One of the saddest things I think in chinuch is when we sacrifice for something and then our children look at us and say, I don't think I feel like going through that sacrifice. And it's so painful. And again, like, with everything in chinuch, it's not like any of this is do 1, 2, 3, and it's a formula and it works and it's guaranteed. There's no guaranteed anything. We have to daven and daven and daven. And, we know that Tilim Shabbos Mevarchim, saying the capital of the children, like, we need to daven because we need tremendous siyata d'shmaya. We can do everything right, and Hashem still needs to help. But we still do need to try to do it right. And trying to do it right means really showing our children that we love the Yiddishkeit that we're living. Do they see a joy in us that Ashreinu Matayv Chalkeinu? I am proud, I love, I feel privileged to be able to be a Yid, a Chassid, doing this or that. I'm happy that we're having guests. I'm happy that we do shluchos, we do the Rebbe's and Yanim. I am proud that we keep tznius, and I'm so joyful, and I'm happy to spend whatever money it is because tznius is so important, right? What are we radiating to them? They're picking that up, and they're picking it up even if we're trying to hide it, and we're stressed out, and sometimes it's so hard. Like, we're making Pesach and it's stressful, and there's so much going on. It's like, and we're venting and we're just looking for some appreciation. But our children are picking up, like, what's the energy? What's the vibe? Do you want this? So that's really one of the biggest avodas is asking ourselves, what model am I showing? And, if I think back to my childhood, some of the deepest values that I absorbed, I don't think anyone told me really. It's what I observed. I saw my parents being completely ibrigeben to the Rebbe's and Yanim, just fully devoted to doing whatever the Rebbe asked and didn't ask, that they knew was the Rebbe's vision, and without kvetching. My father was just like, Hineni, I'm here, I'm doing it. And my mother's just supported it. And there wasn't that kvetching, and there wasn't, oh no, we don't have money because we're doing shluchos. I just saw that example, and no one told me you should grow up and you should do this or that. It was just, that's what I saw. And that's what I felt like that's the way you're supposed to live. Same thing with Avos Yisrael. I was fortunate to grow up just watching my father just take every opportunity to do a mitzvah to help another Yid, and with a smile. And it was like, he was so excited to do it. And so happy to be able to do favors for other Yidden and help them with shidduchim, with whatever. And it's no big deal. And, that speaks louder than anything else. So really the first question is really, what example are we showing? And that's very powerful. At the same time, we do need to teach our children. We do need to explain it to them, especially and increasingly in today's generation. If you think about Sivas Hashem, which is the model that the Rebbe created for Chinuch, there's so much to learn from Sivas Hashem, but I'll just take a couple of them. One is that with the whole system of missions and everything else, which we'll get to in a moment, there's also the rallies. And the Rebbe said so many sichas to the children. And I think it's such a beautiful, like, if we're looking to find words to be mechanech our children with from an inspired place, and like give them Yiddish inspiration on their level, a great place to start is the Rebbe Kinder. As in for us to learn the Rebbe Kinder, to learn to look at the sichas the Rebbe says to children. How does he talk to them? What language does he use? And we can adopt that. And a big part of it is the Rebbe addressing the conflict of the Yetzer Hara, Yetzer Tov, which I have found increasingly to be one of the most powerful things in chinuch of young children. Is you are chas v'shalom not bad, and you are chas v'shalom not on a different team than Hashem, the Rebbe, your parents, your teachers. Chas v'shalom. There's no power struggle. And that's often what happens with children. What happens in chinuch is there emerges what seems to be a power struggle. And when we've started a power struggle, we lose, unfortunately. So what we want to do, and you look at the Rebbe's sichos to children, what the Rebbe is saying is, you are a neshama, and you're on Hashem's team. You're a soldier on Hashem's team and Hashem's army. Hashem, the Rebbe, your parents, the teachers, we're all on the same team. Who's the bad one? The bad one is the Yetzer Hara. He's the troublemaker. You're chas v'shalom not the troublemaker. The Yetzer Hara is the troublemaker. So when we're reinforcing this messaging of the Yetzer Hara is telling us to do such and such, the Yetzer Hara is trying to get us to stop whatever, but like, who does he think he is? And he thinks he's going to win this strong second lieutenant in Hashem's army, and reinforcing, just talking in that empowering language of you're a soldier in Hashem's army, and this is what Hashem wants you to do. And certainly you're going to do it and going to bring Mashiach. Like that empowerment is a lot of what you see there.
So interesting. So again, just if I understand what you're saying modeling, but like, let's say, with healthy eating, like eat yourself, but also talk about like which foods are healthy. And you're saying, talk about it and have conversations, but like, I never thought of it in that way of like, there's the concept of learning, like learn the Rebbe Retz Kinder. And you're basically saying, take it and adapt it to like a normal conversation.
Right.
Like normalize it, like in English, like at the supper table. Like you're not like, now we're learning a sicha about Yetzer Hara, Yetzer Tov. You're normalizing it as part of the conversation. That was like, what was so brilliant. That example was like we could just talk about it. Like, chinuch, and that example of Yetzer Hara and Yetzer Tov really could come up with any value that you're trying to teach.
Anything.
Any midah.
It's, I hesitate to use the word magical. I know magic is a huge concept. It's magical. It's incredible what it does to a child. I've seen children in throes of a tantrum, right? In this, can't get out of this defiant tantrum mode, kicking the wall, and you just divert what's happening, channel it, and kind of reframe. And the reason it works is because you're telling the truth, right? Because the truth is the child does not want to be defiant right now. They're just stuck. Then there's, of course, the Rebbe talking in very basic terms of what does Hashem want from us? Like, don't assume it's clear just because we've taught them you're not allowed to do this on Shabbos, and this is or isn't sneistic, that they understand what we're doing here. Talk about the Rebbe and the Rebbe Retz Kinder. The Rebbe is talking about very, very basic concepts of Yiddishkeit and bring them down to a child's level. No child's too young to understand that we're here in this world to make a home for Hashem. We're bringing the geula with every mitzvah that we do. Hashem is getting nachas. I like to, instead of saying, I'm proud of you for doing a mitzvah, I like to move that to Hashem is proud of you, or the Rebbe is proud of you, depending what it is, or both, because it helps the child understand I'm serving Hashem. I'm not serving my parents with this mitzvah. And I'm not punishing them, chas v'shalom, if I don't do the mitzvah. I'm serving Hashem. Okay, so a great resource that I'd love to use is the Weekly Farbrengen, also known as Laman Yishmu. They have a handout on many different topics, many different Yiddish values, a collection of short stories, Maimarei Chazal, sources from all parts of Torah that help explain the importance of the value, help inspire someone to keep that value, whether it's MS, Yiras Shamayim, Emunah Tzadikim, etc. They can be used, I think they're intended to be used at a Shabbos table. We've ended up recently using them because we have other things we're doing at the Shabbos table, which parenthetically, very important. The Rebbe talks about the Shabbos table, specifically Shabbos evening, Shabbos night, that night Seudah is really a very important time for chinuch and sharing stories, values. It's not just we did the parasha homework, but really it's a wonderful time to share values with children. So recently we've started using the Weekly Farbrengen. This year being Shnas Hakel, we started at home having a family Hakel from Lava Malka. So we've been using that, and that's really nice. Like we choose a topic that we want to hakel about that week, and we'll select from the Weekly Farbrengen a particular topic and share some of those sources and get to discuss. And it's not a response to a child's misbehavior. It's not about a particular problem. It's not a lecture. You did something wrong now. It's just, let's farbreng, let's farbreng as a family. Of course, you don't do this 6 times a day. You choose the times you're doing that at least once a week and share the values one at a time so that they're heard in the home. What is this? Why is it important? And then you have what to fall back on. So that inspiration is really important. We can't assume that just do this, do that. is going to be enough. But if we share that inspiration and we share the sources and the values, then it's a whole different conversation. Then I know what it is that I'm working towards, even if I'm 5.
Right. We spoke about modeling, we spoke about teaching, but I kind of feel it's almost like teaching someone how to swim, but just standing in front of them and making hand motions. Like, how do we actually get them to swim? Not just see someone watching with the hand motions. In other words, what's the next step? So you modeled it, you taught it.
So
then what?
Right. So a key step is, and go back into the Zivas Hashem, is a core part of Zivas Hashem is the missions. And this is a huge part of the Rebbe's Torah in general. Mitzvahs ma'asiyos, actual mitzvahs. Like, you stop a Yid on the street and you don't say, can we talk about the importance of Yiddishkeit? You say, you're a Yid, let's do a mitzvah. We'll talk after. Put on tefillin. Because the moment the Yid has put on tefillin, the neshama is waking up, and, story after story, we know it just, it transforms a Yid. They're tapping into their neshama, and then you're talking to the real self. So the same thing is with our children. We just need to give them as many opportunities as possible at every age, at every stage, to actually do mitzvahs. And the earlier we introduce them, the better. But even and especially when they're resisting and they're not in a great mood, that's where, it always applies that we need to help them tune into their neshama. And it requires wisdom, that it's not chas v'shalom forcing. It's not chas v'shalom coming with negativity. It's coming with, we're figuring out a way to provide them with the opportunity and encourage them that they should actually do the practical mitzvah. So in the example of Tzivas Hashem, that's giving them missions and encouraging them and reinforcing, like, do the missions and let's go up in rank and let's be a strong soldier in Tzivas Hashem. These are all these missions. In a similar way, I have my preschooler who lately has been sometimes saying that, I'm tired. I can't do this and I can't do that. It's getting bedtime. And I'm too tired to say Shema. I'm too tired to this and I'm too tired to that. And what's been working really well so far with him, Baruch Hashem, is just, first of all, ignoring that and not getting into a fight about it, but shifting into the Tzivas Hashem model of saying, well, wow, let's count how many mitzvahs we can get before we go to sleep. Do you think we could get to 10? Do you think we could get to 20 mitzvahs? And he gets all excited about how many mitzvahs he could accumulate. And every little thing is a mitzvah, because in my mind, it's all a mitzvah. Listening to mommy to get dressed, undressed, do whatever you need to do, right? All of that is a mitzvah. So we're counting every piece is another mitzvah, taking off this, putting on that, preparing his nagelwasser, saying Shema, of course, et cetera, getting into bed, getting tucked under bed, right? Each one gets counted as another one.
Each one is a mitzvah.
I think I could do another one. I think I could do another one. And it's just, the more they're like, oh, I did it right. I did a mitzvah. They feel so good about themselves and they want mitzvah gereris mitzvah. That's the fact. So,
it's also like the Rebbe used to give these opportunities. Like the Rebbe gave out dollars and coins and they're so precious. It's like, I'm not just going to talk to you about tzedakah. I'm giving you something. Go give tzedakah, That
is so true. Really, that's Rebbe's models. Give a Yid an opportunity to do a mitzvah. And I think we need to think about that with our children. Give them opportunities to do mitzvahs, not force them. They're opportunities. And how can we present it as such? Here's an opportunity to chapra in another mitzvah. And when that's what we believe and that's what we're sharing, and we actually give them those opportunities, make it doable, make it possible, make it exciting. So if we want to teach them the value of chesed and avos Yisrael, we can talk from today to tomorrow, or we can get them involved in helping. We're making supper for someone who had a baby, or we're doing miftzayim, or there's someone who's not well, or whatever the case is, someone who needs help. And we're involving them in that. And we actually give them opportunities. It's like the Rebbe tells about the Frierdiker Rebbe, the story of, there's this famous story the Rebbe says in the Siches about the Frierdiker Rebbe as an 11-year-old boy, that he had a gemach with the money that he earned for learning Mishnayos. And through the gemach, he met all these Yidden that he used to help, and he developed relationships. And that brought him, the fact that he developed these caring relationships with Yidden because he had this gemach and he was loaning money to them and hearing about their financial troubles, he got to a point where when he was in the marketplace and he saw one of these Yidden who he knew from his loan fund, and he saw him in trouble with this policeman, he naturally jumped at the policeman and had Mesiras Nefesh to try to save this Yid. And the Rebbe explains this is the natural progression of what happened because he got so accustomed to caring for another Yid through his loan fund. In other words, the action of providing our children with opportunities to do mitzvahs sensitizes them to have a feeling to do even more mitzvahs. whatever that is, whether it's ben adam l'chavera, ben adam l'makam, like davening with our children when they're young, or teaching them to be fully tzniistic from when they're 3. The younger they are and the more authentically and fully we provide them the opportunity, which is what it is, to experience the joy and the meaning and the kedusha of the mitzvah, the more that's going to resonate with them, the more they're going to want it. So it's not about waiting until they're inspired, until they understand. It's like find a positive and natural way to just get them doing mitzvahs.
So I want to highlight something. You said a few times not to force them and find a natural way. Any tips for it to not come across forcing and controlling, but to come across positive and natural?
First of all, I want to clarify there's so much, I think, misunderstanding around this issue. And when people think of chinuch, especially when our child is not acting in their most ideal manner and they're struggling on any level, we think immediately in terms of we need to retreat from chinuch, because chinuch is the opposite of what we want to do, because that's somehow controlling the kid and forcing them, and they need love right now. So I want to clarify, chinuch is not control, and control is not chinuch. Completely not. And control is always problematic, to say the least. Control is really what undermines these relationships. It hurts our relationship with our children. It hurts their relationship with Hashem. It makes them perceive Yiddishkeit not the way we want them to. So we're not looking, the goal is not, I need to get you to do this right now at all costs because you better do that. That is not the mindset. So I think it really starts, like with everything, it starts with our own understanding and our own perspective and our own feelings on it. Is we need to realize I'm not here to control my children. That's not the goal. But I'm also not here to let them do whatever they feel like doing because somehow that's going to make them happy. Because neither of those is true. I am here to help my children do what Hashem wants from them. That's my mission. And I'm not allowed to ignore that mission. And the child is not supposed to be ignoring that mission, right? Hashem is expecting me to do the best I can to facilitate, to encourage, to support, to enable my child to fulfill their mission, right? So this is, and so we're not controlling, but we're also not giving up on what Hashem wants from the child. What we are doing is saying we're taking this long view. And the long view is, again, back to the Rebbe Rashab and the half an hour a day chinuch of the child. You know, I'm really constantly stepping back and thinking, okay, Hashem wants this child to grow up to be a chassid, Yirei Shamayim, Balamdin. What do I need to do to help the child get to the next step? So maybe right now what they need is some validation and love. Maybe, but that's a step, right? It's part of it. It's all part of the goal. When and how can I share with them some values? When and how can I present opportunities to them? It's all part of a larger strategy of I'm here to help the child get to revealing their neshama and manifest it as best as possible. So I think just reminding ourselves that this is not about ourselves, right back to that ego. It's not about me, and I'm not here to control, and it's not about what I got them to do this minute. It's the long view of how am I helping them get to a point where they, right? That we lift up the lights, that they are not dependent on us. What am I doing to help that tomorrow my child is more empowered to do the mitzvah on their own, more inspired, more motivated to do what Hashem wants from them than they are today? And sometimes that might mean strategic ignoring, like of a 3-year-old who's not saying a bracha, for example, and ask her of your shilas. But, sometimes we need to choose what we're going to focus on. And maybe we need to not pay attention to all the mistakes they're making and some of the Yetzer Hara behavior. But I think one of the most powerful tools across the board when it comes to chinuch as opposed to control is positive reinforcement. The Frierdiker Rebbe says in Klali Chinuch V'Hadracha that Hahilul v'Hashevach, praise and encouragement and positive reinforcement are just like one of the greatest tools in the arsenal of a mechanech. When we're being mechanech our children, highlighting the good, making a big deal of it, noting when they do it right, calling it what it is, emphasizing in the positive context, not when they did it wrong, when they did it right, what a wonderful value it is, how Hashem is so proud of them, how important it is, what it says about them as a yid, that they did that, and just really reinforcing the positive value that we're looking to teach them, I think is for sure, hands down, the most powerful tool in chinuch. That is chinuch as opposed to control.
Very powerful. I really like the distinction, of chinuch versus control, because sometimes we use the word control, like this person can't control me, or I can't, I really like how you, differentiated, but I'm curious from a chinuch perspective. So what do you do when things don't go well? When you have a child that's resisting or they're not getting mechanicht the way you want them to? Like what would you say then?
So first of all, this is a very painful question. It's one of the nisyonos of Tzar Gidul Banim, and I can't say it's the first generation, but it's definitely one of the big nisyonos of our generation. And whatever I'm going to say, with the utmost support and empathy and love for anyone who is struggling, and we all do at some level with our children at any point with any aspect. And I want to say this, and I hope it comes across sensitively. It's easy to start parenting out of fear because of the concern that is a very valid concern that our children may struggle, and they may struggle to the point that, it becomes too much, chas v'shalom. And that's, it is every parent's fear, and it's really, really hard, and it's a very painful situation. And yet I think it's really important that we constantly remind ourselves and work towards not parenting, not being mechanech out of fear, because that's not a healthy place to work from. We can't do anything authentically from a place of fear. So when we're making decisions about how to be mechanech our children from a place of like, I just need to make sure that chas v'shalom, it doesn't get out of hand and they don't end up who knows where, it's probably not going to look very ideal. It's reactionary. It ends up being, we end up really limiting ourselves and our children. We end up reacting to situations rather than being proactive. And it's the avoid of a lifetime, like everything, to have emunah b'tachon, to realize that we are only in control. Kol b'idei shamayim chutz miyira shamayim. We can only control our own choices. We cannot control the outcome. But we have to know that while Hashem is taking care of our children, He's taking care of the world, and He's going to control what happens, we have to be doing the best thing we can, and that is being proactive about our chinuch and giving our children in a positive, loving way the most ideal and the most complete and the most emistic chinuch that we can. And that has to come with thought. That has to come with a lot of like pre-planning before it becomes an issue, before it becomes a problem. I think often when we talk about chinuch or we see chinuch forums, it's always, my child is struggling with this, what should I do? My child is struggling with that, what should I do? And of course, unfortunately, we always hit those bumps. And may we not, and may we all be benched to be able to raise our children with joy, and it should be smooth. We shouldn't have that kind of tsar. But chinuch doesn't start when my child is misbehaving and they're being defiant, chas v'shalom, or they're not in the mood of davening. Chinuch starts before they're born. Chinuch starts way earlier when I think, what am I trying to give over? What does Hashem want me to impart to this child? What am I doing to get towards that? Not that I turned around at 13 and said, what do I do about the fact that my child, such and such, behave, struggling with this or that behavior. So, I think as hard as it is and as large as the fear is, that we really need to support each other and strengthen ourselves and each other in trying to do chinuch proactively and thoughtfully, and really think, what does Hashem want from this child? Not limit ourselves and our children with the fear of what's going to happen. Then, of course, when there are those challenges, we need to reach out for guidance that is beyond ourselves, so that we're not, just subjective, but really to be able to take ourselves out of the picture and figure out how to help the child. And again, with the same principles, no matter where they're holding, we still want to figure out how to role model for them, how to inspire them, and how to give them opportunities to grow in Yiddishkeit, because they still need that. Maybe they need that even more than ever. And like always, that is, of course, only going to work when that's coming across without our own limited egos, when that's coming across with love and it's fully about the child, chas v'shalom, not about ourselves.
Wow. So much food for thought. I feel like I have to re-listen to this podcast itself a few times so that I could take in everything you just shared, Chanie. I love how you define the chinuch. and gave us such practical tips for how to go about, like, what is chinuch and how to chinuch, if I had to sum that up. So that was really amazing. And also just a reminder that it's not about, it's about revealing the neshama in our children and about what Hashem wants. So that was really, really insightful. But yeah, I just got such a wealth of inspiration. Thank you so much, Chanie. And the truth is, we have a surprise for everyone listening. Chanie actually gave a series of 6 lectures on chinuch. And I know that some of you already heard it, but we're going to share it along with the link for the podcast, because if you're left thirsting for more, like I am right now, and I want to re-listen to this one, and, I just want more. And if you didn't have the opportunity to sit in Chanie's seminary class, then we're going to be sending the link as well for more of Chassidus and the Rebbe's perspective on chinuch. So thank you for listening today. If you didn't subscribe yet to the Optimizing Mothers podcast, please do. Please share the wealth, share this with your friends, and may together all of our efforts in our personal geulas really bring us to revealing the neshama, revealing Hashem in the world, and the real final geula. So thank you so much, Chanie.
Thank you very much. Hashem should bench all of our efforts, and we should be able to show the Rebbe today, Ru'u Gidolim Shegidalnu. These are the children of geula that we have been privileged to raise.
Wow, beautiful. Amen.